On the 10th of May 1973, Bruce Lee was inside the editing room, Golden Harvest building, KT Film Studio in Singapore.
While he was taping for the film, he chewed a couple of hashish leaf, which he had been given by somebody else. So he had a severe nausea and vomiting, and then he lapsed into coma while he was vomiting.
We were helping Bruce Lee duck Enter the Dragon. We had just broken for lunch when we heard someone shouting from the upstairs toilet. We saw a body lying outside the toilet door, and it was Bruce Lee. I remember his mouth was juddering up and down, as though he was experiencing an epileptic fit. So the sound mixer placed a metal spoon in his mouth, and then the producer came and took him to hospital.
Bruce Lee fainted, brought to the hospital. The hottest day in 100 years.
演場啊，或者即係其他方面咧，鬧下脾氣咁，你所見會唔會有？
佢唔係，佢今年5月咧，佢就係發生過一次咧，係嘔吐同埋抽筋。當時係喺片場裏邊做緊龍爭虎鬥嘅配音，咁啊配到一半咧，就忽然嘔完之後咧就抽筋，咁嗰陣時咧就即刻送佢入去浸信會醫院，又係我送佢入去嘅。咁經過急救之後咧，當時情形相當危險嘅。經過急救之後咧，就救醒翻，跟住佢就喺法國醫院住咗1個禮拜。咁但係以後出嚟檢查身體又冇乜事啦，又認為冇咩特別嘅唔妥嘅地方。
On the evening of May 10th, somewhere after 5 o'clock, I received a call that someone was being brought in from Golden Harvest and that it had something to do with Bruce Lee. Bruce's situation was one that appeared to be quite serious. He had very, very irregular respiration. He was perspiring profusely. His color was not good. He was alternatingly flaccidly unresponsive and then some rigidity. There was occasionally some stiffness of his neck. His pupils did not react as they should. Dr. Cecilia Wong, a very well-trained anesthesiologist, responded, came in. We moved an anesthesia machine from the surgery suite on the floor above. In the meantime, I'd been using an ambu bag, an emergency device to assist with respiration. We actually placed a tube in Bruce's windpipe or trachea to assist with the respiration better and to prevent him vomiting into his windpipe. A decision was made to give mannitol, a drug which shrinks the brain but causes tremendous urine output. Put a stomach tube down to evacuate stomach contents, and a catheter was placed in the bladder to take care of that. And as the mannitol was given, Bruce began to improve a great deal. We got an IV going. In the meantime, assessed him as having something going on inside his head. By this time, he was very much improved after he had struggled and resisted us in a discoordinated way as we were working on him. Baptist Hospital had no available beds, and we felt that Bruce needed to be in a place where he could get intensive nursing care. And I went with him in the ambulance, still resuscitating him with the anesthesia machine as we moved him to St. Teresa's. A contact had been made with Dr. Peter Wu, a neurosurgeon with whom Dr. Wong worked frequently and a man to whom I referred patients and who had cared for me as a patient previously. And Dr. Wu concurred in that decision and eventually received Bruce when we moved him from Baptist to St. Teresa's. And then from that point, Dr. Wu took over his care.
He was brought in unconscious. He was in coma, and he was having a fit. And we brought him into the hospital in really quite a serious situation. From what we gather is caused by cerebral edema. the swelling of the brain. So we did some resuscitation for him, and he was very lucky. The next day, he regained his consciousness completely. He was able to relate to us what happened that day. Our diagnosis was that he had probably an overdose of this stuff, or he may be unusually sensitive to this stuff, and that was the cause of his trouble. We had given him a warning before he was discharged from the hospital, saying that he was very lucky. It happened that we were there at the time when he was in critical conditions. We were there to be able to do something about it. Had he not, no medical attention had been available, he would have been dead.
Three weeks before Bruce Lee died, he told me in his office, after he had terrible quarrel and argument with Raymond Chow and some of the staff over there, he said to me, "Little Joey," Bruce Lee called me Little Joey, just in case something happened to me if I died for any reason, pack your bag, leave Hong Kong, go back to Singapore where you are safe. So he said, "You can do good thing in Thailand, go and help the refugee children there." He and I had lunch together. And I say, "McDonald's, as usual, our usual joint, right?" He said, "No, go to a Chinese restaurant." I said, "Bruce, why Chinese restaurant? Why not McDonald's?" He said, "No, when you go to Rome, you won't be able to eat Chinese restaurant."
A few months later, from Peninsula Hotel, walk to the bus station, take a bus. I walk. In front of me, then I see Bruce Lee by himself walking. And that time, white, high shoes, and high collars. Then he walked. "Hi, Jackie." I said, "Hi, where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to play bowling." "You can play bowling?" I go with you. Then I go to the bowling alley, 四海保龄球馆, 4C something. When I get there, wow, I'm so, everybody, Bruce Lee. Yeah. Then I said, Bruce, sit down. Don't come here. Nobody come. No, sign. No sign. What do you want? Then I pay about 1.5 cam. Then he just sit here like this. Then I just sit. What do you want? Talk to him. Looks like a very good friend.
There was nothing to make me think that he had been indulging in the use of drugs again. Now, those contacts were brief. He did not discuss with me more than just briefly the events when he had been so ill.
Before he sent me to Rome, Italy with King Hu, film director from Hong Kong who was born in Beijing. I called my boss at Kaita Airport. I called my boss and he was somewhere in Europe. Couldn't reach my boss. I want to know what my boss told me about Bruce Lee. What will happen to Bruce Lee or me? But I didn't hear from him. So finally, I just go to Rome, Italy with King Hu to negotiate with Carlo Ponti.
Apparently, this movie that he was to make with Ponto Carli, apparently this was really a dark cloud or great threat that was looming on his horizon. Because he had mentioned that is the one thing that was making him feel so very, very much stressed.
To sign a new film contract in which Bruce Lee was going to work with Charles Bronson and Ingrid Bergman, my godmother, on a spaghetti kung fu film. Bruce Lee was going to be the main actor.
I mean, it was exciting. He was looking forward to it. It was going to be the high point in his career. But he apparently was thinking that it was going to make demands on him that nothing had to that point.
He was a liability to Bruce Lee because King Hu cannot speak English. He can only speak Chinese. So he needed my help to translate from English to Chinese, from Chinese back to English. I don't really need to go to Rome, Italy on 6th of July. I don't really need to go.
This little Mercedes pulls up, and there's a beautiful girl, Mr. Hong Kong driving, Bruce is curled up in the back. Behind is a big limousine with his wife and a couple of other people, Andre Morgan. And he says, get in. He's got the window down about this far. I said, where? We're driving along and I'm trying to check out Bruce Lee and then the police pulled us over. And they took us to a restaurant around the corner and the limo followed. And the Typhoon is the biggest Hong Kong's ever had. It's 3 days before Bruce died. Big ships up on the shore. And we finally got into this restaurant and they moved everybody and rolled a table in for Bruce. And Bruce says, if I wanted to fight Raymond, it would take me 1 second to beat him. If I wanted to fight Mr. Hong Kong, it would take me about a minute. If I wanted to fight Andre, 1 second. My wife, maybe a minute. She's a black belt. How long would it take me to beat you? I said, as long as it took you to catch me, I guess. And he said, good answer. Give George $10,000, Raymond. What for? I'm going to do a movie with him. And so Raymond read off the check, gave me the check. Bruce took me down to the bank after Typhoon, bought me a suit, got me a bank account. It was terrible at night. 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. What do you think of this idea? Call me back. And he just worked at different hours.
咁突然嘅死，你哋會唔會覺得亦好意外？
當然大家都覺得非常之意外同埋震驚啦，因為佢琴日成日同埋前幾日，我見到佢都係一啲跡象都冇，即係身體非常之好，任何嘅唔正常嘅情形都冇。
Next thing I knew, I was having lunch with him on the 3rd day, and with Raymond.
The day he died, we had lunch together, and we were discussing the film more and more deeply, and we're having lunch, and we always had a little corner of a restaurant with a screen because people would bug you. If Bruce was there, they'd just sit, literally swarm and stand there and watch him while he ate. And so we had a screen and we're sitting in the back of this restaurant, and he said, I got a headache. And I thought, Jesus, you know, I often get a headache, but it's usually from drinking. And he said, I don't have a headache very often. But I said, well, look, Skip tonight, we're going to have dinner that night.
He was telling me at the time, which I got to admit I didn't take much notice of, he was getting headaches. And I was thinking, God, you look healthy. I mean, I've never seen anybody look healthier than you. And I just dismiss it.
I said, Skip tonight, and when I get back and my wife's going to have a baby, and when that's done, my wife was 8.5 months pregnant.
And then the second time he told me was in a restaurant, Japanese restaurant, the night before I was leaving.
I said, I'll be right back and we'll get on with this movie. I said, but don't worry about tonight if you don't feel well. He said, if I said I'm going to be there, I'll be there.
He said, I'll have dinner with you tomorrow night. He said, look, if you're not feeling well, don't worry about it, and I'll see you when I get back from London. I was going to London, my wife was going to have a baby, and I was going to come back and do the movie. He said, no, I said I'll have dinner with you, so I'll be there.
Next thing I knew, I was having lunch with him on the 3rd day, and with Raymond.
因為佢琴日成日同埋前幾日，我見到佢都係一啲跡象都冇，即係身體非常之好，任何嘅唔正常嘅情形都冇。
And he said, I got a headache. And I thought,
he was getting headaches. And I was thinking, God, you look healthy.
I said, Skip tonight.
He said, I'll have dinner with you tomorrow night.
Next thing I knew, I was having lunch with him on the 3rd day, and with Raymond, and he and I, he said, I don't feel real good. I said, well, don't worry about tonight, I'm leaving tomorrow, and I'll be back. And anyway, he didn't show up that night.
Bruce was my very best friend, but now he's gone. Bruce trusted me a lot. At that time, I didn't want to, nor do I need to explain anything. Because of our relationship, I've been blamed unfairly. His death came as a shock, and there has been a lot of pressure on me. But I'll never let anything spoil the relationship I had with Bruce. At that time, there was a lot of talk. Scandalous rumors about us. I was under a lot of pressure. But I told myself, silence is the best answer. I treasured Bruce's friendship very much. That's why I have put up with the gossip without saying anything to anyone. Bruce has left us. For movies, it was the fall of a star. For his fans, they have lost their most respected idol. But most important, his family lost the dearest one. But for myself, I have lost a very dear friend.
今年咧就大家即係好啱咧，就應該係小龍逝世10週年啦。
唔係講到緣分啊，咁我啊諗起就武俠巨星李小龍。哦，你同佢都好有緣分喎，睇嚟啊！咁你哋最初第一次係點樣相識嘅咧？
一定要問呢啲問題啊！
我諗係觀眾想知嘅問題。
我如果相識咧，就係差唔多12年前啦。我啱啱係歐洲翻嚟係一間酒店嘅 lobby 咧，小龍就同周文蔚先生一齊，咁啊周生介紹俾我識嘅。
哦，咁你唔好介意，因為同你傾偈咧，就自不然都會去傾到小龍嘅問題。點解咧？就唔係話呢件事唔好話，你好似我哋俾啲壓力你啊，實在你承受壓力已經10年咁耐，喺呢方面咧，我何必個人咧係衷心佩服你。咁而且咧10年咁耐，你仍然咧生活得好好，對方各方面嘅壓力咧，你仍然支持得住。但係好多朋友仲係好想嘅，係想知道一啲真相，但係啲真相咧，除咗你之外，冇一個人可以答得到啦。咁故此我哋要問你。
10年我都係咁樣度過，我覺得已經因為我冇做到虧心事，又冇乜所謂。同埋咧，我失去一個好好嘅朋友，我已經好傷心㗎啦。今日你問嘅問題咧，我都可以答覆你，因為我覺得我丁佩咧係一個敢做敢當嘅人。即係如果我做咗咧，就做咗；如果我真係同小龍咧即係做愛，佢死咗啦，我都會承認嘅，因為我覺得冇咩需要隱瞞。咁啊唔係就唔係啊嘛。好多人可能好似都係你咁諗啊！
但係小龍喺你屋企有事，呢個係真嘅係咪？咁當晚嘅情係點樣？
當日嘅情形係咁啊！佢同周生一齊嚟到屋企傾劇本，就係《死亡遊戲》。咁啊，又係定咗我要同佢拍呢套戲㗎。咁點知真係玩咗《死亡遊戲》，我都唔知。咁啊傾緊劇本，佢話頭有少少痛，我就俾咗1粒頭痛丸佢食。咁啊，佢話佢入我房唞一陣間，咁我俾佢唞一陣間啦。咁啊我諗住我仲閂咗房嘅燈添，諗佢俾佢好好地瞓一覺啦。收尾咪即係要叫佢未叫醒啦，咪即刻打電話俾醫生。哦，
咁當時即係佢休息，
已經昏迷咗。
佢休息嘅時候咧，你同阿周生仲係繼續傾緊啲嘢啊咁之類，都唔知佢發生事嘅。
咁啊係，咁點會知咧？
係，咁啊後來再揾佢有啲事再傾啦，咁啊再揾佢先就知道有咁樣嘅事發生啦。咁啊係，
而家我睇到人瞓覺我都驚嘅真係，睇所有啲人瞓覺。
即係一瞓就分分鐘唔識醒啊！
唔係，即係完全會估唔到呢啲事啦，呢啲好冇，我自己都想知道啊。
係咩原因？
係咪點解會咁樣咧？係咪一個人好好地瞓覺瞓一陣間就咁樣，就未叫醒佢？呢啲對我嚟講，我諗我受啲壓力咧。多過普通人太多㗎啦！呢10年啊，我都唔可以忘記。
係，所以呢一點咧，就頭先我都幫同事咧，大家傾過就係話，我心底裏邊咧非常之佩服丁佩就係呢一件事，因為一個人咧喺心裏邊埋藏精神嘅壓力，受咗成10年咁耐，而仍然咧係咁有勇氣，一路生存做得好好，到而家咧係人都讚你，或者越嚟越靚咗。
I knew what led to his death. Bruce Lee. On 20th of July 1973, Bruce Lee and Raymond Chow went to Betty Ting Pei's apartment house to look for her, to bring her to the restaurant to meet George Lazenby, former James Bond actor, for dinner and talk about Game of Death.
The evening began with Bruce in the apartment of Betty Ting Pei with Raymond Chow, specifically for a kind of business meeting and rehearsal of a script. Now, there's no question in my mind that that was valid information.
He visited my home to discuss the screenplay for Game of Death, which was to star us both.
For some reason, Bruce Lee got a terrible headache. How he got his terrible headache, I don't know.
That sometime during the course of the evening, Bruce began to feel unwell.
Bruce said he was experiencing a headache, so I gave him a painkiller.
And went into the bathroom in her apartment while Raymond was still present.
He asked Betty Ting Pei for permission to lie on the couch. He said, go to the bedroom there and lie down there.
He then actually lay down because he was feeling bad.
He then asked if he could rest in my room. I said, okay, go and rest for a while.
In retrospect, I think that was a bit unwise on his part. If he was feeling that bad, he should have either gotten to a physician or he should have gone to his own home, but perhaps he was anticipating he would feel better.
I feel this was a very normal reaction. If you have a friend in your home who is not feeling well, you would surely act in the same way by offering him a painkiller.
And Raymond Chow went to the restaurant and waited for them.
Sometime thereafter, Raymond left the apartment to meet another business engagement.
Game of death, and he was going to finish it with me. And he wasn't going to kill me off. It was about different levels. And we're talking about spirituality and different levels of awareness as you get to higher levels in this temple that he had built. And I think he'd done the first 2 levels or something at the time. We were going higher. But that evening, I was with Raymond Chow.
And I was waiting with Raymond Chow that evening for Bruce.
When it was time for dinner, Betty Ting Pei went back to her room and tried to wake Bruce Lee up, but he couldn't be waken up.
Betty eventually, when she went in to check on Bruce, found that he was not only asleep, but that he was unresponsive. And she became frightened.
And Raymond and I were sitting there staring at each other with not much to say. And I said, where's Bruce? He said, I should be here.
He didn't show up that night.
And he was about half an hour late, and it's not like him to be late. So I called, I said to Raymond, I said, where's Bruce?
So he said, I know where he is. He's not.
Now, I'm not sure how she knew how to get in touch with Raymond. I don't know whether it was a beeper. I don't think we had cellular phones at that time.
Do you know where he is? He said, oh yeah, he's, I know where he is, this is the number.
At home, he's with this other woman. I said, well, call him. Let's see what's happened to him.
Call Raymond Chow.
The phone rang and it said, I don't know what happens, but I couldn't wake up Bruce. So why don't you come? So in a hurry, I went to Betty's place and
I called up. He was with his girlfriend, not his wife.
So he calls up and Betty Ting Pei was her name. Answered the phone and said, I can't wake him up. And Raymond said, well, try and wake him up and we'll wait a little longer.
And I said, what's going on with Bruce? He said, I can't wake him up. I said, I'll call back in 5 minutes. If you can't wake him up, I'm calling an ambulance.
So we waited about another half an hour, more sake and beer or whatever. And he called back again. And I said, call back again. He called back again. He said, he can't wake up. I said, well, get a goddamn ambulance.
Called back in 5 minutes, and she said, I've called an ambulance already.
But anyhow, she was able to make contact with him.
Came over, tried to wake Bruce Lee up, but he also cannot be waken up.
Bruce looked very pale. We called and we couldn't get any doctor that, at first we couldn't get Bruce's own doctor. And then tried to call several doctor friends of mine, and they were not available. Until finally we called the doctor who actually prescribed the medicine to the actress. Dr. Chu came.
Raymond Chow called his own personal doctor to come and help. Try to wake him up, also cannot wake him up.
Either at his advice or on her own initiative, she then called her own personal physician, who was Dr. Eugene Ju.
There was panic in the room, not sure whether Bruce Lee was dead or alive. One person was not panic at all, and I know who was that person.
And actually over the phone, when I described how Bruce was, he said, you better call an ambulance right away.
Dr. Chu went to the apartment. I'm not sure whether he was told that it was Bruce Lee that he was going to see.
When I saw him, he was just lying nicely in bed, well dressed, no sign of any violence or any other struggling. So to me, when the first time I thought he was asleep.
But as I understand it, when he arrived, Bruce was already dead.
Well, I had a quick look at him, looked at his pupils, and found that the pupils actually were quite dilated. And when I listened to the heart, there was no heartbeat. So it's obviously that he was not alive.
Now, there have been some discussion since then about whether or not he actually tried to resuscitate.
Tried to do some resuscitation and did some external pelvic massage, but obviously it was not going to help.
Dr. Jew instructed Betty that she should get a government ambulance right away.
So I quickly asked for the ambulance to come to take him to a public hospital.
He did not certify death. He took Bruce's body to Queen Elizabeth Hospital.
I rang Linda before the ambulance came and said we'd better meet at the hospital, at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital.
Called the ambulance, came over.
The ambulance arrived.
Brought Bruce Lee to the hospital.
The information that I was given was that Bruce was already definitely dead.
By which time he was already dead.
I was talking to another doctor who involved in the resuscitation team. I said, Don, his name was Don. I said, Don, I can bet you that Bruce will come back sometime. But I hope that next time we will still be here to look after him. But I'm not convinced that he's going to give up. But I said, he probably will come back. And Don rang me up. He says, Peter, what you have told me came true this morning. Bruce is dead.
The police came, take over, told Raymond Chow to get up. His job was temporarily over for now at that time.
就關於小龍呢一次嘅突然間離開人世啦，咁好多人都覺得係痛失良才咁樣，咁呢點咧相信你嘅感受更加大嘅啦。咁可唔可以講下你自己本身嘅感覺係點？
我覺得就係非常之痛苦，而且係差唔多係唔可以相信，我差唔多一路都唔相信係咁一件事發生，因為當晚我哋仲約好一齊食飯嘅，就後來。佢唔嚟得咧，先至知道咁嘅時間。之後一路咧，成晚一路到佢喺醫院裏邊話正式逝世之後咧，都仲好似唔相信係咁時間，或者好似係希望忽然咧第二朝醒咗咧就原來係發夢咁。就因為我哋合作咗咁多年咧，係佢喺香港可以話係我哋最接近嘅朋友，除咗係事業上嘅夥伴之外。
而家仲未曾醫學上嘅解釋咧，都仲未曾有，可能要禮拜一先知道。但係就琴晚同埋今日咧，醫院方面同埋警方咧就都認為係佢嘅死因咧係冇可疑之處。
I lived perhaps 50 yards from Bruce's place because a number of the old homes in Hong Kong that had been Chinese homes had been confiscated during World War II by the Japanese invading troops. So in Hong Kong there was this interesting mixture, and Bruce and his wife bought one such home, and I can't remember whether they tore it down or remodeled it, but they had a Japanese type lawn that tapered back gently from the street, and beautiful home that contained his gymnasium and large living room area and place for the children and so forth. I get this call, must have been midnight to 1 a.m. from Raymond Chow. I thought they would have to make the best they could of giving the facts of the circumstances, particularly emphasizing the fact that Raymond was there with the two of them in the apartment, and that it was a business get-together, and that Raymond only left because of being called away. But certainly what we know about the physiology of his illness based on his previous acute attacks would make it more reasonable to think that there was very little time between the departure of Raymond Chow and the terminal events for Bruce.
I know the truth. You cannot block me. You just cannot block me how Bruce Lee died. I know how Bruce Lee died.
And then I got back to my hotel. Bruce Lee's dead. What do you think? Was that quick? And I went back to LA, and then Raymond rang me and said, "You got $10,000 of mine." I said, "So? That's Bruce's." He said, No, you owe me a movie. I don't do Kung Fu. He said, "We'll send a guy over to teach you." And they did. Ex-murderer who come over for four months. And after the first day, I couldn't get out of bed. I thought I was fit. And he said, I knew George would say that when he came and went up the stairs and got me and pulled me out of bed. And we did this for 4 months. And then Raymond said, "You're ready to do Kung Fu movies now." So I did 3 of them.
Hong Kong police was under the control of the British police, which in turn was ruled by the Scotland Yard. And Bruce Lee's case was a very serious case, so Scotland Yard took over.
It was a number of the people who were involved in the immediate incident. Professor Tier, Peter Wu, myself, I think perhaps some of the hospital staff who'd been, where he come into Queen Elizabeth.
Bruce Lee was born in San Francisco, but he died in Hong Kong. So these 2 countries got involved. The Scotland Yard and the FBI were coded together to find and investigate the death of Bruce Lee. What really happened?
But it was to caution us about how Hong Kong was really on the spot in that we were not considered to be a world forensic pathology center. Any conclusions there would be drawn should be drawn by the toxicology or criminal experts and not actually voiced or suggested by those of us who were the local folks.
And then they declare officially that Bruce Lee died of unforeseen circumstances, which was not true. This is only the official report ordered by the Scotland Yard, which in turn was ordered by the British government.
That certainly is not an imprudent move to just make us do consciously what we should have done reflexively even without that.
Jackie, I gotta go. I said, okay. Then I send him. The last face I see him, just call the taxi, turn around, he cannot. Then I just sitting here. Nothing. He just go walk away. Then I go to pay. Then oh, you know Bruce Lee? Yeah, my buddy. Then about months later, then he's gone. Yeah. That's how I met Bruce Lee.
He said, this could be our last meal together. I might not see you again. I said, what do you mean by that? So he couldn't say anything. He couldn't tell me the truth. That he might die.
Bruce had a thorough physical checkup in the States, and the doctor responsible for his checkup told him that he was a man in the 20s. His physical fitness was such that he was still a man in his 20s. So I think Bruce must be fully convinced by then that he was invincible. You know, he was really in his perpetual youth. That was probably what brought him down, I think.
There was nothing else that we found in any of his detailed workup that was any kind of a threat to his life. He should have had a normal or beyond life expectancy had he just not used that medication.
English woman said there's nothing we can do about it. He's in a better place. Bruce Lee is in a better place. So we just move forward and do whatever we can.
Be the